The creative assembly began with only one member, porting PC games onto a new generations of hardware. Gradually, after great success, the team grew and so did the projects. 4 titles were produced under the name of Total War, each beating the last in sales, leaving great impressions on their publishers, EA, then Activision, then Sega, and completely revolutionising strategy gaming in the process. They seemed unstoppable, invincible, like they could never make a bad game. Medieval 2 Total War was regarded as the best of them all, winning numerous awards. The dev team were ready to hit back in 2009 with a new title, a new era on a new engine. This was meant to be the next Rome Total War, a game that would take the company into a whole new glorious age of gaming. Empire Total War. The game on launch was a mess. Unstable, buggy, and with an AI that could barely even control itself. The game received very hateful reviews and only got a 67% on Metacritic. CA's studio director, Mike Simpson, addressed the issues. This I'm going to split into 2 different parts. Part 1, the bad stuff that is said. Simpson stated that he knew at the time he was not happy with the game when it was released, but attempted to justify it, stating that its release date was a commercial reality, meaning they saw it as close enough to be done to be accepted and sold. In addition to this, he stated to the fans that they should not post negative reviews, as this will hurt the company financially, affecting future titles. Although everything he said was true, this is stuff that he should not have said. However, Simpson did make some good points when he addressed the game. Part 2 is about the good stuff, so Simpson did also do some good work when he addressed the game and explained why it was so broken, which I like it when the developers do that. They can admit their own mistakes. Basically, the main issue was that the game was too ambitious. He described the AI as being by far the most complex code edifice I've ever seen in a game, and the AI was reaching a tipping point where too many factors resulted in the AI disagreeing with itself internally, and so it kept getting paralysed. Simpson, out of embarrassment for the game, refused to let his own friends play Empire, at least until the release of version 1.5 through multiple patches. Major critics before release swayed away and avoided talking about the game's problems, focusing more on the positives, such as the multitude of factions, the existence of very well detailed naval combat, and the vast amount of historical accuracy. The game became the fastest selling of all Total War titles. It was the most popular game in Britain for its first week, and sold almost double the amount of copies as Medieval 2 Total War. The hype for Empire was crazy, like nothing ever seen before on a Total War title. To this day, the most viewed Total War video ever on YouTube is a battle gameplay using the Empire Total War demo. The positive reviews from the critics and the mass sales, but a terrible launch, is the perfect way to lose the trust from old-time fans, as shown by these survey results here. The survey results do show that the majority of people who got the game either on or close to release agreed that the game ran terribly, and even with all the patches, most are still saying that Empire Total War does not run great, although there is agreement between people saying that it has improved. The game released with many different versions. The German version had Prussian box art, the British version had British box art, and so on. If you bought the Amazon version, you received the Dahomey Amazons. If you bought from Best Buy, you received the USS Constitution ship. If you purchased from Game, you received the Death's Head Hussars unit. It does not end there. The game also came with a Special Forces edition, which included a few extra ships and units. In addition to all that, another 14 units were added for free in patch 1.3, and Total War released their first paid DLC, and which included 14 more units. Although I like that it was different for different regions, everything else just made it messy and confusing. Surely there was other stuff the developers could have been focusing on. Also, the lack of Jeff Van Dyke, the composer who had been there from the start, was another downside to the game. Richard Beddoe took over, and he has great music for Total War, especially in Napoleon. I love his soundtracks there, but the soundtrack could not compete with the old classical titles. I truly do believe that if this game launched as stable and as simple as, let's say, Napoleon Total War, then it could have been one of the best ever. It had everything going for it, and yet had everything against it. A while before this, Creative Assembly Australia was founded. The Australian team would often work on porting games and then creating some of its own stuff, such as Sonic games, working similar to how the original CA worked before Shogun. Eventually they got their big chance. It was the Australian Creative Assembly who set to work on the creation of Napoleon Total War. Napoleon Total War was very similar to Empire, but critics congratulated the game for being smaller and more focused, believing that helped a more stable and complete launch. The game released with far fewer additions, creating simplicity for the customer. Everything in Empire was in Napoleon, but it was much simpler and ran smoother. This, however, also came with a critical response. Many people complained at it for it being an Empire clone. One of the most notable critics here was in GameSpy, which complained about the game being an Empire clone with bad AI and there's limited ways to win a battle. 2 out of 5 stars they gave it. Gaming Revolution described it as an expansion at best. Now let's take a look into the opinion of the community, and as you can clearly see by these stats, some people did not like the game because they thought it was an Empire clone, but not that many, and as we can see by the current opinions, they don't think that way now. Clearly it seems the critics saw this as more of a problem than the gamers themselves did. CA had gone from being the kings of strategy gaming to having 2 games that did not come close to the hype behind them. 2 games that succeeded financially in initial sales, but had greatly lost the trust of the fans. It was time for CA to go back to their roots. Shogun 2 Total War was released. The game brought back many of the old fans and the support for CA with it. It was a success, selling millions of copies worldwide. The game would later release with a standalone expansion, Fall of the Samurai, which likewise also gained positive reviews and sales. Jeff Van Dyke was brought back to compose the music, and although I'm not personally a fan of the Eastern music style, many people were happy to hear his tracks being played in a new Total War title yet again. The survey results show that an overwhelming majority of fans of Shogun 1 who came back to play Shogun 2 were impressed by how far the company had come. CA seemed to be back on track. The dev studio planned to hit again with another theme known to be popular in the past, the Roman era. Rome 2 Total War was already under development and launched in 2013. The announcements came with some of the most beautiful looking trailers in the game ever, showing massive armies and perfectly, almost realistic looking soldiers. CA by this point had over 100 employees working on the project, and then it released. As described by Game Informer, it was a step backwards. Rome 2 was plagued with the same issues of Empire: bugs, glitches and a failed AI. Countless YouTube videos released commenting on this matter, one of the most popular of which being the Angry Joe review of it. Rome 2's intention was to upgrade all the core features, but again, like Empire, it was too ambitious. The dev stated a year before release the game had already reached 3 million lines of code, and that it was still increasing. The game was so bad on launch that it required 14 patches after that first year alone. Some critics' test builds did not even work, and the games required specifications that were ridiculously high, to the point where most people could not even run the game on the lowest graphics. One anonymous dev came out and claimed the game was not even playtested, and the fault was on the side of Sega, not CA, for rushing the development team. Simpson later apologised for the state of the game in its initial release. Let's take a look at the survey results. So clearly we can see people agreed yet again that it was a buggy mess on release. People generally seem to be claiming Rome 2 was worse than Empire on release, which is saying quite a lot. Despite this though, Rome 2 beat all its predecessors with release sales, as yet again the game came with a lot of hype from the fans, especially considering the success of Rome 1 Total War, and that it came straight after the successful Shogun 2 Total War. Rome 2 sold a total of 1.4 million copies in just the first 6 months. The pre-orders for Rome 2 were 6 times larger than the pre-orders for Shogun 2. In addition to this, the game featured many paid expansions and faction packs, releasing more DLC than any other title, and after all that, it failed on launch. Ships on land, people's faces getting messed up, and whatever this is. One positive though is that all owners of Rome 2 received the Emperor edition for free later on, and the game was eventually heavily patched, unlike Empire, which still struggles and still is too similar to its release date to this day. In addition to this, battle animations were done with people and then transferred onto a computer, and to get the sounds of, for example, armour being whacked by a sword, they would get the armour and whack it with a sword in a studio to get the perfect sound. The attention they played to detail for Rome 2 was impressive, but too ambitious at the same time. Currently Rome 2 Total War has a big fan base and many players logging on every single day, unlike Empire. And the stats show us something very interesting. The majority say that the game runs quite well, now that it has been patched. If we compare the change over time to Empire Total War, clearly Rome 2 was patched much more, to the point where now most people think it is very playable. One question that went out asked if people could trust CA after such faulty releases. Some fans said yes, and they still could trust them despite everything, but a majority voted no. They had lost their faith in CA. There is no doubt that having the company's 2 most hyped historical games fail at the level they did severely hurt the company in the long run. Despite the profits, the games continue to rake up on the release of each new title. The release of Empire and Rome 2 still hurts CA and Sega. Simpson later stated that never again will a Total War title have such a terrible, buggy launch, and 6 to 7 years later, that promise has been kept. Hope you enjoyed part 2 of the history of Total War, and please do subscribe to the channel so you can get ready for the release of part 3, the final, which will look into the company's expansion into saga titles and the fantasy genre. I am also thinking of doing spin-offs of this series, if I get the views that is, where I look into the history of Total War YouTubers and how they influenced the game, or look into the history of Total War mods and like how they developed over time. But only if the views for this series are here will I do those. These, from research to scripting to recording, editing and all the other stuff, take a very long time to make, so a share or something like that would be greatly appreciated. Subscribe for more, hope to see you in the next video, and goodbye.